So let's talk about the sources of law. So we already mentioned about judiciary, but you still have a parliament, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So we have our primary sources of law, primary legislation. So we have actual acts of parliament. I'm not sure actually in recent years what it's been like because of COVID. I haven't looked to see, but previously I think it was something like 70 to 80 acts of parliament were being passed a year. And then we have secondary legislation as well in the form of things like mostly statutory instruments. So this is legislation that is produced otherwise than by Parliament directly, but with the authority of Parliament, usually by individual ministers or people within government. And there's around 3,000 statutory instruments produced yearly. They're usually pieces of legislation, small pieces that would supplement primary legislation.
An enactment that is produced by Parliament, how is it usually called? So people may know, for example, if they search for some enactments produced by the Parliament, is it like a statute or Act of Parliament? Do you have some standard names for that?
Well, I mean, I would say it would be an Act of Parliament. Everything that is produced by Parliament as a law will almost always end with the word Act. In terms of finding it, legislation.gov is not too bad. It's not always properly updated. Everything can be found on there.
I see. So how does it correlate with the common law or the case law that is produced by the judges?
The case law is about the interpretation of the statutes. And sorry, I'll address as well, statute is a broad term. Statute could mean effectively all of the written laws that we have would be statutes. Act of Parliament is a specific type of statute. Mm-hmm. And in terms of how the two interact, as I say, case law is effectively an illustration or interpretation of the written law.
So then let's explain what is secondary and primary source of law.
Are we talking primary legislation and secondary legislation here?
Yeah.
Because as I say, primary...
Or maybe in the broader concept. For example, what about all those different reports as to the case law and interpretation of those reports, like specialist commentary, for example, like treaty on contracts, for example?
Yeah, I think we cover those as well later. I would call those aids to interpretation rather than specific sources in themselves. But yes, if we talk about them, things like Halsbury's Laws of England and treaty on contracts, as you have here, are very, very helpful ways to understand the law and to interpret it as aids. If we're looking as well at what we would, I guess, here call secondary sources, there are usually explanatory notes within legislation, preambles. We could also look at Hansard, which is the basically the log of parliamentary discussions when a law is made, to see what the original intention was behind that law. If anybody has access to Halsbury's, that is one of the first places I would suggest ever going to try to understand a piece of legislation, because what Halsbury's does is combine both aspects of the written law itself with footnotes that will link you to cases to discuss how it's been interpreted. And it is so broad. I don't know, Olga, what it was like for you when you did the LPC, but for me, we were in some kind of transitional period, and we had the hard copy of Halsbury's with all of the supplements as well. And it took up an entire room in the law library. So we all just used to use Halsbury's through Lexis.
What I can definitely tell you, we don't have anything similar in civil law jurisdiction. So for many people, it would be possibly hard to understand what is Halsbury Laws of England. If you define it in a very general term for people who never saw it.
It is like an incredibly vast encyclopedia of law. It contains an explanation of effectively everything. So the law itself, if you look at a statute now, if you went to look at say an example like the Unfair Contract Terms Act from 1977, some of the words in there may not make sense to you. You may not know how to interpret those words. If you look them up in Halsbury's Laws of England, they can tell you how those words have been interpreted, what they mean, how they can be applied. They can give you a list of sources to explain it as well. So you have authorities. it's an incredibly useful tool.